Hi, everybody. It's Tantra and Liz and Deborah and Janice today, and a new collaborator, Lori. And I'm going to turn it over to Janice to start our time together, and then Janice will turn it back to me. Janice?
So welcome, everybody. We are at the end of our first series of Create a World episodes, and we are going to spend time today reflecting on the conversations that we've been having and sharing what's up for us around those conversations. Joining us today is Lori Candon. You probably saw Lori on last week's episode, and we are really happy to have her joining us as a Create a World collaborator. Over to you, Tantra.
And Lori, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do in the world?
Hi, like Janice and Tantra said, I'm Lori Candon, and I'm currently in Columbus, Ohio, also have a home in Costa Rica. And I would say my biggest contribution is sentient movement and flowing through Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, dance. And I love being able to witness people come into their own empowerment. So that's really what I do. Everything that in life is geared around supporting others and myself into being all they can be. And thank you for allowing me to come on Create a World. I'm excited.
That's great. Thanks, honey. I want to start today by just letting you know that in a very interesting way, what has us on Create a World in the past, including ourselves, those of us that have businesses and those of us who have a creative endeavor, it would be to promote that creative endeavor or even to promote the contribution that we seek to make to the world. This framework is a little bit different. To start with me, which is, I promise you, practically completely incomprehensible. To say it in a short term, but think of it like I'm a meta scientist. I'm given matrices, like designs, like an architect is given a design, or an artist is given a design, or someone who writes music is given a design. And that design is the request of creation is to bring it into the world, not as data or information, but as a framework within which new futures can rise. And Create a World is one of those that came to me, and then Janice and I collaborated on it, and then et cetera and so on. Other people, so far women, have come in to collaborate with it. And one of the foundational aspects of Create a World or creating a world is to be in each other's presence. Like in the movie Avatar, I see you. So what does that mean? I see you. Well, in 2014, I started an experiment with a global group of people. It was called Spirals of Being. But underneath it, the framework was vulnerability, transparency, and the search for authenticity in oneself. So today, all of us on this panel that you have seen in the past weeks in our presencing different phenomenon to you and different experiences to you, we will find, our background, what would it be? Our background personal knowing, personal vulnerability, transparency, and the search for authenticity is to actually mature that in ourselves. There's a lot of truth out there. There's a lot of, I was thinking today, we actually have to relearn everything right now. There's no topic that we're not in that isn't either the structures are collapsing, the structures don't serve life, the structures are against life, the frameworks don't give us deep intimacy with ourselves, others, or life, much less our physical structures of our world. So today, I'm going to ask 3 questions of the people in your presence. And that is, I'm going to start with the first topic, vulnerability, and then have them, each of them explore in their own manner, openly with you, what they experience being on YouTube with you, having to present themselves and present their world to you, and we'll start there. So in the area of vulnerability, who'd like to share with us, because we're part of in the presence of what it was like for you to be on these sessions, these times with the people?
Well, I'll start. So I would start by saying that it's thrilling. I am somebody that I think came hardwired for authenticity and vulnerability, and it's definitely my preferred way of being, and it's my preferred way of interacting with others. I'm the person at the party who isn't interested in talking about the weather or the sports team. I want to get right to, your internal world. And so I just love being able to have those sorts of really open, honest, deep, thought-provoking conversations. To me, one of the most exciting parts about being alive is exploring. I mean, and we have this huge, vast world to explore. And so I just love being in that. And now that doesn't mean it's not also a little bit scary and a little bit, vulnerable for me. It certainly is, because I still mostly in my, when I'm not with the field of Tantra Mat, I work in a government agency in a public school system. So I'm still very much in the other structures, the reality of separation in my everyday life. I think that's why it's even more meaningful for me to come on and share in this really open and honest and exploratory way. So yeah, it's a little bit me knocking, but it also definitely gives me life.
And in the past, Janice, in regard to the school system, the government, and yourself, in your opinion, what has been the cost to vulnerability? The ability to be vulnerable.
Right. So because those institutions are predominantly performance driven, outcome driven, that can create an environment that's a little bit mechanistic. And of course, when you're trying to be in that mechanistic outcome, you're not interested in anomalies, right? And I mean, each human being is unique in their design. And so that, right, like snowflakes, no two are alike, which means one process, one procedure, one approach doesn't work exactly the same for everybody, which is really irritating for people who are trying to be in a mechanistic world. But the thing is, learning and growing into the human being that we're meant to be, that can't happen without access to our vulnerability and our authenticity. And so I would say ultimately the cost is that we have millions of people every year going out into the world who haven't actually been adequately prepared to be themselves. And that means at a moment in time like right now, where we really need everybody's brilliance, most people don't know how to access it. And that's a huge cost, and part of what we're looking to turn around here and create a world.
Thanks. Who else? And then if someone knows they want to follow the next person, just open your mic. Just playing off what she said. and what you notice about yourself.
Okay, I'm gonna go. There's many ways I'm very similar to what Janice described. But in my field of work, which is psychology, there's a lot of training for establishing boundaries and keeping ourselves separate from the client so that it's all about illuminating the client's world. But especially because I've worked mostly with teenagers for a good while, and that's not the way teenagers learn to operate and learn to individuate. So it's been a really interesting process to find a way to be vulnerable and real that also focuses on the other person. There's also, in my private life, I also have a lot of trouble sometimes being vulnerable because of what the word vulnerable means. It's not an easy thing to do. And to have that be, it's not just considered valid, but there's something about vulnerability that weaves into the fabric of one's life and makes it different, makes it sturdier, makes more available, well beyond just the, as Janice is pointing out, the mechanistic world of the first, like recipe world is what I would also call it, recipe world. So to me, there's a lot of mystery about vulnerability, but also a lot of sturdiness, like weaving a really sturdy rug. And, you know, I've watched a YouTube thing on someone weaving a rug, weaving the Navajo rugs and the Turkish or Persian rugs that last for thousands of years. It's a phenomenal process. Very, very, very sturdy, beautiful, vibrant, and present and valuable. So there's something about that for me in vulnerability too, and knowing how to flow with it. Because it's not just about being impulsive, whatever crosses your mind is what you blurt out your mouth. It's it would be difficult to define exactly what vulnerability means in terms of my daily do. So that's what I'd like to add for now.
The other thing, Deb, is I know personally it took you quite a few years to get your degree to be the type of therapist. You're already a type of therapist, but the type of therapist you want to be. Was there a vulnerability in that for you the last years, and then doing your dissertation, and like what self-thoughts came up that were, because self-thinking is also part of we're vulnerable to our self-thinking. You know what I'm saying?
No, actually, can you say a little more?
Yeah, like self-thinking, like I can't do this, or why am I doing this, or but those in themselves carry a vulnerability, do they not?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just since you're in that field, I thought I'd take advantage of it,
Yeah.
just to give a little idea that you've lived what you're being with your clients in your own fashion. And I
Right.
think there's something that happens that makes us an authority if we can't share our own vulnerability. We're like this pseudo authority that has it all handled, and we don't have any problems. And so there's this cultural vulnerability that with it missing, there's always some measure that we're missing according to the society around us.
Yeah, I think if I'm hearing you properly, to address the second part first, the difference for me came in finding the difference between being an authority or being an expert versus an authority. I did not want to be an authority. I mean, that's a really fine line because you do have to be an authority as a psychologist in the sense of I'm the expert with regards to your issues in this situation. And if I'm going to be talking to another service provider about my client, I need to be an expert and an authority. What I might call bring myself to the party and not be able to, it's not about dominating the other person, but be assured in the collaboration that I would form with them on behalf of my client and be able to attend to questions and disagreements in a way that left the other service provider affirmed, gave me what I needed and wanted for my client. And if there was a disagreement, how do we resolve that? On behalf of the client, not on behalf of our egos. And so there's a certain amount of, so shifting out of what authoritarian meant was part of being vulnerable. And then when I'm with my clients, being an expert, but not authoritarian or an authority in a kind of stereotyped way was really, really, really important. And, you know, I'd get pushback from the kids. And sometimes that's perfectly fine. And sometimes there would be ways of saying, hey, wait a minute, why did you hire me? I know a little bit more about this than you do for several reasons. I'm older than you, more life experience. This is what I get paid the big bucks for, so let's just get to work. There's other times when I would have to set all that aside and listen to them and let their expertise about themselves be the driving force. To go to the first thing you asked, I think I'd say the real vulnerability came from training myself not to let those thoughts of, oh my gosh, I'll never make it. Why is this worth it in the first place? Because like, for example, with the dissertation, we get told, oh, do something unique and innovative and something that's a contribution to the field. And by the time, the closer, for me, it took me a good while, longer than most people. And so I was getting told, just do something, just slap it on the paper and get it over with. Those are opposite things. And weren't true to who I was at all to do the second one, just to get it over with. So the same thing's true with those thoughts of, I'll never make it, whatever the examples were Tandra said. And it takes time or practice, whichever, to not let those be upper hand or the truth. There's a certain, I don't know how to explain this, a certain vulnerability to say, that's not true. I'm not letting you join the party, to those thoughts. That's a mystery I don't have sorted out. I don't have words to yet, but there's something about standing in, I'm going to say who I am and whether I can make it or not. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to talk about this. I've never had anybody ask me this before. It's kind of like a vulnerability with myself first. And who am I going to say I am? And then what does that mean about presenting out into the world? Does that kind of respond to your questions, Tandra?
I have no idea. I was really clear that none of us have explored any three of these topics openly in conversation. I love us having to be authentic in our speaking because we had no ability to prep for the questions. So you're good.
Thanks.
Thank you. Lori?
Well, I love you bringing up these three words because I've spent my entire life playing within these three words. And I know that vulnerability for me has shifted from a place of weakness to a place of powerfulness. And while the word power in itself might have different connotations for people, I'm speaking from the way of being internally congruent with how you want to move upon the world, in the world. And from that place, knowing I'm competent, or there's many competent people out there, the alignment with the confidence to move with what you know to be true can be very vulnerable, but it's also very galvanizing. And in that, the transparency and the authenticity, to me, they kind of all work together. And before I go any further, like right now, my full transparency, my body is like, yeah, like I feel extremely nervous in my knowing and in my vulnerability to share brings up emotion. And when we as a global community can be in that, honoring the uniqueness, like Janice was saying, of all of our designs, that is powerful. That is vulnerable, transparent, and authentic. And when we can get to that place where our entire planet is in that, operating from that place, great things can happen.
You know, I want to say my listening, and also tears in my eyes. Two things that you and Deb both presenced was she shifted from the word authority to authoritarian. Now that may seem like nothing, except we listen words with baggage. Every word in a dialogue right now just carries baggage. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? You know, I used to say, not so jokingly, if your definition of your husband loves you is because when you say take the garbage out and he says, no, I'm not going to, and that means he doesn't love you, then you don't know what love is. I used to do something in honor of men only. And I would say that when women would come in, and I'd say, and if that's the truth, you need to not be in this room. Which leads us a little bit towards authenticity, towards transparency. But the fact that subtle shift, if people listen to this again, between authority and authentic, I can't say that other word, simply shifted the relationship to, oh my God, what if I could trust an authority? What if I could trust an expert? What if that whole framework of being damn it, somebody pronounce the damn word.
Authoritarian.
Thank you, that word. If somebody could no longer have that torturing them, and they could listen to someone of authority and listen to an expert because they trusted what you said, Lori, inside that frame of I think they might see me. I think I might be safe with them. And I want to introduce the word before I call on you, Liz. I think I can be awkward. I think I can be awkward. And one of the things I said before we got on, I said, if you want to talk on top of each other, go ahead. This ability to be awkward and not have it all down right, which we're almost scared to take a step because of it. And then I can't remember what you said. You said, I can't remember it now, but there was a way that if people go back and listen, if they're interested, there's a way you were speaking and then you shifted the framework of the word. I don't remember what it was right now, but the minute you shifted the framework of the word, that word became more available than like a topic that has you judge yourself. Like when we talk about authenticity, vulnerability, I'll talk about transparency in a second. It's turned into the framework of our broken system, and in that our broken mind that says, oh, another thing to judge myself with, another thing to say how I'm separate from life and how I can't make life work. So even in the framing of how you all are languaging and what you're bringing to it, not that you're trying to, because I tossed the stick in the gasoline right before we got started. That sensitivity to feeling how when someone's languaging, that they have lived it. That's authenticity for me. That they have lived it shows up in the ability to hear them, actually hear them, that they practice what they preach. They walk their walk. So thank you. Liz, let's go over to you, whatever there is for you, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Wow. So rich. Looking back over this last 6 weeks, I've constantly come up and danced with having to be vulnerable because of what I've brought as an educator. I've had to be in this dance throughout my whole career of knowing this innocence that I bring that people buck up against. I've had to deal with that all throughout my career, and I'm still having to stand in innocence is good. Being vulnerable and scared and awkward, as you say, is a good thing. I've learned it's the juice. It is the juice. It's that oil. It's a flow that takes us into just these rich relationships with others and connections with others. And standing in being awkward as I'm struggling now to create my words is so important in connecting with each other. So part of my design is bringing threads from everywhere, whatever my passions are, bringing those threads to others and weaving them together, as Deb said. And I don't consider myself necessarily an expert in that field of bringing what I hear and learn from others, but yet speaking through this awkwardness and this juicy place. I think, as Lori said, will speak to people and will help others to come to the party, to understand that it's okay to mess up. I've spent my whole career in working with children that constantly mess up. And when I show them that I mess up as well, I notice that opens a door so that they can see that it's okay to be who they are. It's okay to mess up. Mistakes they're the brilliance. They're the brilliance, really, because we learn from that. We learn from when we mess up. So I work with the underdogs. I had this, it just reminds me of an experience yesterday. I had to really stand in this vulnerability. My frustration with a student was rising. He's moving into his teens and sowing his oats brilliantly. And so I had to stand in being vulnerable and saying, you know, when I was your age, I didn't know pre-algebra either. It was like Greek to me. I couldn't do it. And I'm sitting here right now having to go on YouTube and find the answers. And the light went on. He's like, oh. And then life opened up and we moved into pre-algebra together and we slapped 5 at the end because we persevered and we stood in our vulnerability with each other. That's pretty cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Complete.
Thank you, Liz. The reason I divided it into 3 words is to give them a place in language. My medium is language. I'm a consciousness linguist. and I listen to language, and language permeates my intelligence in a way that lets me hear what language gives life and what language does not. And language is not necessarily the words we speak. In fact, it isn't the words we speak. It's the resonance. It's the world behind the words we speak, not the circumstantial world, but the world of creation, that which gives life and has us exist as whole. So that's why I chose 3. I'm going to talk about transparency last. I'll start now because I want, how I knew today would be very important to presence was in 2014, I started a global community. And that global community was based on vulnerability, transparency, and authenticity, not to teach it, but to see if I could design frameworks within which it could occur. So this is the listening I'm going to bring to the party. Was it possible for me, because we have our personal self that, Liz, you just really shared that, and all of you shared some element of yourself personally with the person. But was it structurally possible to create a container, which would be like a business or be like a educational structure, in those frameworks? Was it possible to create a structure in time and place and how it all fit together and how people would find themselves relating to each other, but also how they would find themselves relating to a larger spectrum of what might be available? Was that, would it work, basically? And it was only going to be 7 years. And in 2020, well, we're still here and it worked. And so there's now this natural phenomenon that's in the fabric of the relating. And it's so invisible. It's stunningly invisible because natural frameworks are invisible. Natural frameworks, do you ever ask when you get up in the morning why you're walking? Do you ever wonder why you didn't hit the door? Or the roof didn't fall in on your head? Or you can breathe? Those are natural frameworks. And in my 57 years of work, I've noticed that humanity has lost its natural frameworks. So vulnerability is natural. And not being natural causes disease, mental, emotional, spiritual, emotional, and structural disease. Hence, let's create a world. So we're going to look at your search for authenticity and why kind of like in hindsight, because I don't think anybody ever understands why they get lightning struck by the word authenticity and then spend ever how long they can survive it, trying to figure out what on earth they're searching for. So we're going to turn this over to those of us that are hanging together in your presence and just explore it. So who wants to start? Just open your mic and go.
I'll say something real quickly. One of my symbols that I use is a lantern, and one of the principles I live by is lighting others' paths to knowledge. And so, in that exploration, I'm constantly looking for authentic messages that are coming through for what's present right now. It's part of what I love to do. And so that lantern is authenticity. It's someone willing to share of themselves, even though maybe what they're saying is evidence-based scientifically, maybe not. Maybe it's based on a message they've heard internally. And there's just it is hard to language. There is just this way of being where I can connect and trust because they're willing to say, I'm not sure this is true, but it's true for me. They're willing to say, I know that science says this, yet in my experience, I've experienced this, and this is how I've experienced whatever that is. And those are the people that I'm really drawn to. People who claim to be, let's go to, media experts, so to speak. I struggle with that. The other thing that's true for me is I am drawn to life-enhancing authenticity. I just thought of that with the media. There's a lot of not life-enhancing things going on in the media, and I do know that when someone is speaking messages about what is true for them, that is life-enhancing, I lean in. I'm very, very drawn to that. So I'm drawn to people who have the light to say, I don't care what anyone else thinks. This is what's true for me. And I stand in that.
Thank you, Liz. Why don't you call on somebody? Oh, Deb's got her mic open.
Yeah, I
Oops,
wanted to ask you a
missed the
question, Liz.
opportunity.
I wanted to ask you a question, Liz. How do you register? Like I heard you say one thing that has you register authenticity is if it's life enhancing for you, right? How else would you register? Because as I'm listening to everybody, I'm noticing how difficult it is to define these words. I'm not sure that defining them is necessary, but or even a good idea in this conversation. But I am noticing how we're having to talk around these words to get at it. So how do you register authenticity for yourself? And what would you say life enhancing is? Because that sounded like a register.
Tough question. For myself, I pay attention to voice tone. I'm a musician and I play the flute and the guitar and I play piano in the past. And there, I don't know how to describe it. There's this resonance in the voice tone that I listen for, and it's generally a softer tone. I can hear really strong language coming from someone when there's a softer tone. So,
Is it harmonic, Liz?
yes, yes, there's our harmonic resonance to it. And I'm thinking right now of two separate people that I've listened to. One who's this lawyer he's just the sweetest and says powerful words, and some of it not all life enhancing. But there's this even tone to his voice, and of course a softness to his voice, where I can really register and pick up on the knowledge that he has as a lawyer, and where he, not necessarily where he stands, he's very even. It's just an even tone. And then on the other hand, there is someone else I'm hearing right now who does have that softer tone, but their language and where they stand isn't always life enhancing. And I notice that I turn them off quicker than I turn this other lawyer off when I'm listening, because there is a spike in their voice tone that leads to not life enhancing and has my solar plexus clench. And I'm not that. I don't want to be with that. I don't want to be in that harmonic, that dissonant. I've talked lately a lot about dissonance and how dissonance can be a really good thing, because that's the turn in the spiral just before it moves to the next greater whole. But there's such a difference in life enhancing dissonance versus not for life dissonance. So yeah, I register completely through my solar plexus. So if I register anxiety towards someone, I know to flight or fright kind of thing. I know to shut that down. I don't know. It is a struggle. I don't know if that helped at all.
Well, one of the things I want to add is that one of the crashing points in our society is we've been people-centric. In other words, we give people properties. And actually what you just said, I think, is brilliant, because it wasn't about it wasn't about the person. It was about the aspects of the language in the person. You could pick up the parts that would work for you and that you could operate on behalf of. And you could pick up on the parts that you couldn't operate on behalf of. And then like the next stage after that is like one of my favorite things is my definition of accountability, which is basically it's what you can count on. So I had a surgeon, I wouldn't have met him for tea. In fact, I wouldn't let him touch anybody else but me, because I asked him the question, can you save my life? And he said, ma'am, that's all I do. That's all I needed. His bedroom manner sucked. I couldn't stand how he treated his assistant. But I knew on that table, and he said, nobody speaks a word when I'm in surgery. Nobody. Everything's hand motions. I could trust him with my life, but I would have not have trusted him with my soul. So that I love that discernment, because then it's not people-centric. It's either what somebody's committed their life to that they're an expert in, but you might not want to invite them to dinner. But I learned from him. I would never have lived if that specific surgeon hadn't had that specific skill. Anything else, Deb, as you want to go?
Yeah, I will. No, I appreciate you responding to my question, Liz. Thank you. That just really stuck out as like you're unique. I just thank you for the illumination. I appreciate it. As I'm listening, I'm noticing that how interrelated these words are: vulnerability, authenticity, and
Transparency.
transparency. Thank you. And they're so interrelated in a certain way. And what I was noticing is that authenticity doesn't mean, or transparency doesn't mean sharing everything about my life story, or, necessarily how I feel about, about whatever in the moment. It's not about just blurping it out necessarily. Could be. So it's like something that shifts and changes as life flows on. Authenticity and transparency is different in different aspects of our lives, is what I'm noticing. I think I'm not sure. There's something about getting really confident with oneself in such a way that allows you to be confident with whoever other is, and or self-assured, or
Interesting, the word self is there.
yeah, that permits the engagement with oneself, others, or just whatever's occurring in life. Doesn't have to be another person. But to do so authentically or with transparency would have a whole different result than to do so without those energies. And I think for me, it's been a bit of a journey. It's been a bit of a journey in a lot of domains of life, and a lot of time spent engaging from maybe how I was conditioned to be, or how I was supposed to be. And it took a long time to even distinguish that wasn't, even if with some experience of, this isn't me, but yet that was like so way beneath the veneer and the conditioning. Took a long time to get to the point where I could say, is this me or is this not? Is this authentic? Is this transparent? Or is it not? And then what is for me? It's not very hard, never has been, to discern what's authentic coming at me. But to be that has been a journey, and to shed what was inauthentic. It's been quite a journey. And now it's easy, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Until the next rung. Until the
There you
next
go.
recursion of the spiral.
There you go. But
I
don't
want
tell
to
anybody.
I won't. We won't be transparent here. But till a minute from now, I want to add something from the mystical realm. Because I had ways from the time I was young, and when I got into certain traditions, I'd watch him go save the earth, and I'd go, Jesus, honey, I think the earth wants to save you. Can we have this dialogue? But what I noticed in myself in that realm that I live in is that I had to know the tree was relating to me. I had to know I was authentic enough that I knew the tree and I were in the same consciousness, intimate consciousness together. And I have a 12-foot metal dragon outside my house. And at night, I go in the backyard. I go to her and I wrap my arms around her, and her wings come down like this. And I feel her wrap her arms around me, and I cry because I know I'm safe for another day. So, and that's my realm. And it's important for people in this conversation. Everyone here has a realm, and we're exploring life through that lens, through that realm. We don't know other realms, other lives. You're only hearing our lenses and our search and our way of whatever we're present to here and whatever we're sharing. So Janice or Lori?
I'm gonna defer so that we can get to the third chunk.
I was going to just defer it till next week, Janice. In case you have anything, let us know, okay? Lori.
I would just like to add, for me, the authenticity. Do you know where you're at? And are you able to be witness and seen from that place? Whether it is life enhancing, not life enhancing, or what have you. I prefer the life enhancing also, like Liz and all of us. But underneath all of that too is life. So can I meet you where you're at and be vulnerable enough for me to be seen, or for you to be seen by me and me by you and what have you. So I just wanted to add that piece.
That was succinct and a great summation, not summation, synthesization, sorry, wrong term. And Janice, how about you start with transparency?
Yeah, so I'll echo what Deb was saying about the interrelated nature of these three words that we're talking about. And so to me, when I hear transparency, I think of a willingness to be able to say, this is who I am, this is where I am, this is what's going on for me, this is how I experience this. But in order to do that, you really have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. You have to know where you stand. You have to know what matters to you. And again, I think we've been generally raised in cultures where we've been told this is who you are. In other words, this is who you need to be. This is how you need to be. And so I was born in Philly. I went to school in Boston. I am arguably a Yankee, and everything that means. And I find myself now living in the South. And I just that sweetness and that, bless her heart, that just is not in me. And so I frequently have to find myself making the choice of being acceptable or being authentic, being transparent, in meetings, in organizations that I'm a part of, and saying, this is how I see it. This is where I'm coming from. This is what is motivating to me. And so, as we talk about all this, there's the need to be able to understand who you are, but also the need to make space for the fact that, as Lori was saying, in a world that's truly life-giving, each of us gets to say what's true for us. And the challenge then is not making our interactions with other people conditional on them fitting the molds that we have. And as we become a more global society, 100 years ago, people weren't living in multiple countries. They weren't living in multiple states. They were being born in a town and dying in a town, right? And so there's a much smaller construct with which they had to dance. But now people are, all over the place, and we can connect to anyone in the world at any moment because of the internet. So I think we are really all being tasked with expanding our acceptance of others. And yet, so I think back to in my early years of teaching, and because I was brand new, they would ask me to be on every committee, and I didn't know any better than not to say yes. So I found myself on the school's diversity committee, and one of the things that they did every year was they planned a multicultural fair, and one of the predominant thing was like a fashion show where everybody would wear it. And it was really beautiful and gorgeous, but they were talking about the fact that that really what they wanted to do was increase the degree of respect that kids had for each other, even though they were from different, different backgrounds. And I, because I didn't know any better at the time, and I said, well, the thing is, if you really want somebody to be able to respect somebody else, you need to first help them respect themselves. So really, if that's what you're wanting to do, then you need to help these kids learn to respect themselves. And that was like, ooh, lead balloon, boom. No, because that did not fit anywhere into the plan for the fashion show. But I was being transparent, right? That's what was true for me in the moment. I probably would say the same thing if I found myself in the same conversation. But so I think that's what's on us, is to be able to be willing to discover ourselves. And I think that's the vulnerability piece, right? Because, oh my God, what might we find if we go deep in there, right? So we're being asked to be vulnerable so that we can be authentic, so that we can be transparent.
Great score, as we say. So the score, I'll try to put it up on the somewhere, but we made these 10 platitudes, and because we just want to, even though we love don't steal, don't mess with your neighbor's wife, we liked we wanted different platitudes, like oops, duh, we score, check. So just know when any of us say those terms, it's coming from this sort of list that we thought would only be 10. That was the last limit, but we're now up to 12. So we're not quite sure how populated our little list will become. Operating states, you could call them. There are three things I want to bring to this. Transparency is my gig. It's the tipping point for me. It's the politicians that can say, I'm cheating on my wife because I found somebody I love, and my wife and I have talked about it, and our life no longer works for us. And the community goes, thank you for being transparent. I'm not going to vote for you because you are not perfect. So transparency for me is the big gig. And when I started the Spirals of Being, the one thing I had to promise myself, and it's still true, some of you have watched Safe and Sacred, that you will be present to what I'm present to when I'm present to it. So you've seen me sob over my dog. You've seen me almost die of COVID. You've seen me be in my worst moments. You've seen me when the power of the Lord is upon me, whatever Lord is at that moment. And that for me, transparency is raw feed. For me, transparency is just being raw and having room for a greater system than identity of our personality have a chance to play with us. In the indigenous world, there's no thought of purpose. There's no even thought of contribution. There's no thought of the dog is about to pull my earbuds out. There's no thought about that. Not that thought's wrong, because it's all we got. But the unnatural is his butt. Sorry. Transparency.
And pretty natural.
Oh gosh. But the phenomenon of letting it all hang out responsibly, like I don't go outside and get naked, but when you're in interactions when I'm in our interactions with myself, I also have to let it all hang out in me. I have to be raw feed with me, not just other people. I'm having a bad day with me today. People will hear me say that. Me and me are having a really day. I've already said 2 cuss words. I can't do 3. And I think they'll get me. And so that's one thing I wanted to say. The other one is historical, not hysterical, historical. And that is that, we're right at the end of the hour. That is that Marco Polo and other travelers were what started the world being diverse. So it was in that moment of cross-culturing where people in isolated countries and isolated realms found out that there was other worlds out there that were contributory. It's so sad now that the indigenous people have to find out when the enculturated worlds come into their society, they do not include and assimilate the value of their society. They destroy it. So this ability to be not only transparent, but honor each other's culture of transparency, that gives me the right to say, I'm having a psychic surge. And people don't know what that is. But in that transparency, they are still with me having that psychic surge. So that, for me, transparency is the name of the game. So we're meeting on Wednesday, and we will discuss if we're going to continue some part of this conversation then. And for now, we totally appreciate your time with us. And we want to thank you for allowing us to be in your presence. Create a world.